A very good morning to everyone present here. I'm Adila Mohsin, and today I welcome you to yet another lecture in our lecture series. Today's lecture is again by Miss Manasi Panwar ma'am. She is, you can say it's a continuation of her lecture, even though it's on a different topic. So today's lecture by Manasi ma'am will be on feminist criticism. Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, everybody. Today we'll be talking on feminist criticism. So, in this, I will be moving with the introduction to the key concepts. We'll discuss a few writers. As it was told to me that there are also first year students or like first or second year students. So, I've actually started right from the scratch of it so that the concept is very clear to you. With like the psychoanalytic criticism that we discussed, UGC NET from these theories and criticism theories, they usually ask you questions based on the concept rather than specific works, right? So in this lecture also, I'll be covering the concept as well as the repeated works that they keep asking. At the end, I've also put up like a few previous year questions for you guys to have a reference as to what sort of and what pattern of questions is usually asked. Fine. I'll move from the historical context to the waves of feminism. I'll be talking about key concepts, the writers, and also I've taken like a really small section of Indian literature. I'm sure that whoever will be taking your lecture on Indian literature would also cover these writers, but they also fall under the purview of feminist criticism, so I've included them as well. Okay, this is the introduction. Yeah. See, so what basically is feminist criticism? It is just a theoretical approach wherein we are looking at pieces of literature. It could be a poetry, it could be any novel, a text, or a prose that you pick up. And then we need to analyze that particular text as to what is the position of women in that text, right? So, where are we situating women as a gender in a particular text is what falls under the discourse of feminist criticism. Now, in this, we look at what is the position of women. By that, I mean that is the woman in a oppressed position, or is the text discussing what are the challenges of women, be it in a colonial context, in a post-colonial context? Is it discussing the slavery of women? Is it discussing whether women face discrimination of any sort at work, at home place, domesticity, any sort of things? And then it also analyzes the power dynamics between the two genders, which is male and the female, by a very long-standing narrative of patriarchy. Male gender is usually considered as the superior gender, and usually there are cultural norms that also shape this gender role. For example, in India itself, or in for that matter, global South, we have patriarchy as a concept, as a very real construct in our society. A lot of our societal norms, structures, cultural values, traditions are shaped in a way where the power dynamics is lopsided for women as a gender. And this is all what feminist criticism does, that we look at the text from a point of view as to associate or understand what is the positionality or contextualization of women as a character or as a gender in a particular piece of text. It could be maybe or analyzing a piece of poetry and trying to understand as to what are the experiences of women when she wrote it. If you are a first year student also, you must have read Kamala Das. She is one of those pioneer writers whose poetry you can see and actually think or maybe just imagine the struggle that a woman must have in a patriarchal society like that. So her poetries actually reflect on these things. Now, the key focus areas of a feminist criticism is that what is the representation of women in literature? Are they equally represented, or are they lopsided in their representation? Are we failing to address equal representation of women in literature? What are the gender roles and stereotypes that are attached? What is the patriarchal structures that I've already talked about? That there are like a lot of culture and traditions that are shaped with how real or how constructive patriarchy is in a society. Then what are the voices and experiences of women writers? All of this is what frames the basic framework of the feminist criticism, and this is what usually is discussed whenever you analyze a text from a feminist lens or from feminist criticism's lens. Okay. Moving on, what is the historical context of it? So it is very essential for anybody to know the historical context so as to be able to actually situate or maybe do a critical analysis of a text. Now you know the waves of feminism is there, but where did it start is also an important point. So in 1790, there was this text which was written by a political leader, and he talked about the rights of women. And it is just imagine a male talking about what sort of rights are supposed to be given to women. Now, when you inculcate adjectives like given or provided by a male to a female, you're anyway reasserting the sort of superiority that a male gender or a male person has over of women. So this was this particular text that was written as a political document. It was like a manifesto where it was suggested that women should be educated only to a particular age. They are to go to a particular sort of school, and this would be the curriculum that they are taught, post which they are to move into domesticity or like domestic roles. In a reaction to that, Mary Wollstonecraft wrote this feminist manifesto, which is Vindication of the Rights of Women. It is a beautiful piece of prose. It suggested that irrespective of the examination, one should read Vindication of Rights of Women. This was written in 1792, and it argued that whenever you are not providing equal access to education to women, that is exactly where you're cutting them and posing them as inferior to men. If you provide us equal education, equal resources, there is no area, there's no field where women can't compete equally to men. This was the main argument of a Vindication of the Rights of Women, that you are not to cut the rights of women or maybe give us limited rights. Because once you do that in terms of education specifically, you are actually putting us out of the race even to compete in the first place. So this is considered as like the foundational text as to where the first seed of feminism itself was there in the literature. Then in 1848, there's this Seneca Falls Convention happened. Its convention basically means this was like a very formal meeting that happened with like people who are working very well in the field in terms of feminism, political activists, and things like that. And this convention was basically the first formal movement as to, we need rights, we need to compete. This is it. We have had enough discrimination. But post 1848, this is US, of course. We took even longer as a global South to reach to this. But in US and in global North, it started in 1848 with Seneca Falls Convention, post which the suffragist movement came. Their first demand was equal rights. They felt that whenever you're talking about representation or any sort of, if you want right to education, you want right to vote, or you want right to property or anything, you need to have that representation. And that's what their first demand was. So this is a historical context as to where feminism started. Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of Rights of Women is more often than not asked, I think, in every other cycle of UGC NET. So this is a really important work. Also note the work, against which this was written as a reaction. Sometimes they ask, usually questions are based on this only. Post these three things, like these things happened, and mind you, all of this is global North. This is not us. This is not global South. We are probably still in the second wave of feminism, and they are probably in their fourth wave of feminism because of the economic and other disparity. But again, this forms the foundation for feminism all across the globe. Moving which, there are waves of feminism as we study. So waves of feminism do not have a set time period as to, this date it started. It's like a very ongoing process. The whatever progress is made in any wave of feminism, it is also dependent on the sort of development that you have, the sort of economic resources that you have. Of course, it is faster in global North. But the first wave of feminism focused on women having equal legal rights. We wanted equal legal rights. We wanted suffrage rights, like voting, basically, and property rights. That anywhere, if we are to have a representation, these are the three big parameters which ensure that we at least have a chance of having an equal representation, and that's what they asked. Whatever literature was produced from this wave of feminism around this time period roughly basically examined as to how women are trying to resist gender inequality, and how having a legal right or a property right or an equal suffrage right would help us move away from this gender disparity that has been there for like decades and centuries maybe. So the first wave of feminism focused on this. Now, from a literature's point of view, please note that these are the three figures or the works which are very important in that, came up in the first wave of feminism. First one we have discussed, the Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of Rights of Women. Then Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she was the leader of the Seneca Falls Convention that we have talked about. She co-wrote the Declaration of Sentiments. Then Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. I'm sure most of you have read it. In probably first year also, I don't remember if it's there in the curriculum, but I feel that this is a read that everybody should have. A Room of One's Own. This advocated for financial independence. That talked about that, we are not to write as maybe Charles Dickens wrote, or maybe some established poet wrote. It wanted to create a space for women writers as its own. Not at any point they wanted to disrespect any of the male established writers, but the point was that we are not, that if Charles Dickens has set a pattern for writing a prose, it is not necessary for us to stick to that. Maybe we create our own patterns. So that is what The Room of One's Own is talking about, that I should have my space as a female, and I should maybe set a trend. Why am I supposed, or the society expects me to follow the trend of whatever written is there? You might remember that there are a lot of women writers who took by the pen name of male writers, because that the literary space was such that the publishing was an issue. Maybe the reader base was not such for women writers. So in first wave of feminism, all of this was emphasized. The key achievements was, of course, women's suffrage happened back in 1920 itself in USA, and then also there was expanded access to education for women. Until this, is there any doubt? Else I'll move forward. If there's any doubt, I'll clear it. Else, we'll move to second or third wave of feminism. Anything? Okay. Fine. Now we have second wave of feminism. I'm not sure as to what year it was, but probably in set waves of feminism se question aaya tha ki what writer is associated with a particular wave of feminism. So the jo key figures or key writers have first wave, second wave ke uski ek table banana is usually helpful, so that you remember as to what writer is associated with a particular wave of feminism, and it will also help you to eliminate the options in case there's a question like that. Okay, now in 1960s to 80s, when we have had equal voting rights, suffrage right, and things like that, and access to education, second wave focused on what are the cultural inequalities, what is the discrimination that we face as a society. It could also be in terms of whatever workplace discrimination is there, maybe in terms of, male are paid higher for the same job that you do. There's a wage discrimination. Maybe there are reproductive rights. It could be abortion. It could be right to have family planning and, contraceptives, access to that. Then family structures, that as a woman, I should have that sort of autonomy to decide for myself. No male should sit in the parliament or maybe at the Senate and should decide for what reproductive or other rights I have. And this is what the second wave of feminism focused, that as a society, we should evolve as a cultural norm itself, that women are given, women narratives are prioritized. It is women who are taking decision for women rather than somebody as a male figure or an authority sitting at the Senate. And this focused on how women narrative should take the center stage. And that is exactly how we will challenge patriarchal structures, or maybe we'll evolve as a society as such. Because no matter what sort of change you have at the paper, it really does not manifest itself in a way until a society progresses together. So the second wave of feminism was very focused on the society as a whole, as a unit, that the society has to evolve together as a unit for women to have like an equal space or a center stage. The key figure is, of course, Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex. It is one of the most one of those seminal works that very vocally, bluntly challenged patriarchy left, right, and center. It just discarded the concept of us as other, or maybe us as an inferior gender, or maybe female as secondary or second sex, and things like that. And this just it also sort of talks about what is the systemic subordination of women. How do social, political, cultural structures also sort of perpetuate this discrimination against women? And this is not a very long read. If at all you have time before or after the exam, you should go through it. It's an excellent written piece, and it just discards it so bluntly that even now, in a post-colonial context or in a modern society, we go back to this text whenever we are analyzing the intersection between gender and discrimination and race and things like that. So second sex, again, a very favorite question of UGC NET. Also, they keep asking this time and again. Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique, again, a very important work. This is also something that is usually asked in the UGC NET. This basically challenged the view that who said that women are supposed to be confined to domesticity, or who gave these gender roles, who had the right to decide for women. And it challenges all of that. Not long ago, I mean, most of you would live in hostels and things like that, so you are managing your things at home, like things at your room, and then you're going out, maybe you're fetching something, whatever you need during your college hours, whatever you do. So you no longer need a male accompaniment to yourself so as to work outside the home. And this is what the work talks about, that you cannot confine me to domesticity just because I'm a female. I would love to do both, or maybe the gender roles could be, transformed. So, more now we see that gender roles are becoming more and more fluid. So this is what the second wave of feminism basically was talking about, especially in this Feminine Mystique work. Then there is Kate Millet's Sexual Politics, again a very important works. Sexual Politics basically talked about the representation and the politics of sex in literature. This work entails the fact that there have been the readership issue with women writers, right? If you have like a male writer in comparison to a female writer, probably in the same genre or theme or whatever, it is just the bias of this as a society, or the gender stereotype, that we prefer the male writer, or we feel that if the male writer has written it, the argument might be the same, but the conviction lies towards the male writer. So it talks about the patriarchal structures that still exist in literature as well. Sexual Politics is also one of quite asked question. Then after the second wave of feminism happened in the US, they have this organization for women, equal pay, reproductive rights. All of this started to come across. Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, I'm sure most of you must have read it. It is also this work that talks about that who gave men rights to decide for women bodies, and why do women not have the autonomy to their body themselves. So this work talks about the autonomy of body, if the reproductive rights, if or not I am to have a family, this is my right. At what time to have a family, again my right. So it talks about patriarchy controlling women bodies, and men suggesting as to when you should do what about your body. So the Handmaid's Tale basically talks about women autonomy, women bodies, reproductive, all of this. And this is like key of second wave of feminism. These four works essentially very, very important. You should know like just the basic, that what the work is talking about and the year in which it was published. Chronology has been sort of the shift in UGC NET nowadays, that they keep asking the year of publication and things like that. So that's why I have tried everywhere almost that I am writing the year in bracket to the work. If at all I've missed it somewhere, please add it in your notes. Do not miss the year in which any work is published. Okay, I'll move to the third wave of feminism, which is essentially sort of the last as per the global north. With global south, again the narrative changes with the wave of feminism. Okay, so when the second wave of feminism was there was this one central argument that usually happened between activists, was that whatever progress we have made in women, or with women rights, with women development, or maybe betterment of their life and things like that, that has been restricted only to white women of class, and white women who can actually afford all of this. And that led to the thinking that, oh, we are maybe not that inclusive. Maybe we are not catering to a tribal woman, or we are not catering to a socially or politically backward woman, or maybe we are not catering to anybody who identifies as a woman. Now you know that gender has become very fluid. It is not just the binaries. We are moving away from the gender binary towards a more fluid gender, which is LGBTQIA plus inclusive. So a lot of then activism and research went into analyzing what is the intersection of these things. How can we inculcate race into it? How can we inculcate class into it? How can we inculcate the fluidity of gender into a wave of feminism? That it should be inclusive. We are not leaving literally anybody out from the wave of feminism, is what the third wave of feminism was inculcating. Now, in this, the one thing to understand is that when you talk about the fluidity of gender, you are talking about literally anybody who identifies as a female. I go by the pronouns of she and her. Somebody else can go by the pronouns of she and they as well, irrespective of what the sex is. So you know that sex and gender are different things. So the fluidity of gender basically incorporates anybody who identifies as a woman and deserves to have equal rights. Now, the key figure in this one was Bell Hooks' Ain't I a Woman, is a very important work, and a feminist theory from margins to center. This book this piece of prose talks about how women are, or feminism, or feminist criticism, or feminist theories are a gateway to bring women from the margins of the society, or from marginalization, to occupying a center stage, which is much needed. Whenever women are talking about, or whenever we as a society are wanting for women to succeed. So this is what is this piece of these two piece of prose basically deals with. Judith Butler's Gender Trouble is very important. Like, mark it as one of the most important works for UGC NET. Gender Trouble and this concept of gender performativity is given by Judith Butler. Sometimes they ask like this simple question as to who gave the concept of gender performativity, and that is Judith Butler. So gender performativity, you need to understand, is that Judith Butler said that gender is performative in its form. Like, as a female growing up in a household, if I am said that you are supposed to behave in a certain way, dress in a certain way, talk in a certain way, I will do it as a gender performance. If as a male you are taught something else, or your cultural values are something associated to a male gender is something else, the child will grow up to have those sort of cultural and gender values. But if you do not have these watertight boundaries, you would let the person decide for themselves. And that is what gender performativity is, that gender is just performative. If you want to teach very traditional things, you would do that. If at all you want to give freedom or the space for exploration, that is also there. So this is a very important concept of gender performativity that you should keep in mind. It was given in the book Gender Trouble. Then this another African writer who's very important, and all of you should read it, I.E.H.E. This is this essay, We Should All Be Feminist. This talks about inclusive feminism. Inclusive feminism in terms of race, class, gender, whoever identifies as female. And it's a very short read. I don't think it's more than 3 pages also. So this is also a very important work that talks about inclusive feminism. Okay. The key movements were Me Too movement. Me Too movement also gained a lot of thankfully popularity and awareness in the global south, especially with India. Sadly, there are like a lot of we the news made rounds for a lot of renowned politicians and other people caught up in the wave of Me Too movement. This was to highlight whatever sexual harassment and assault have been there for years. This also advocated for LGBTQIA++ rights within feminism, as I've emphasized that whoever identifies as a female or goes by the pronouns of a female, their rights should also be included within the wave of feminism, is what this wave focused on. Key literary works were Toni Morrison's Beloved. This talks about what is the trauma which is associated with women and how it intersects one's life. You must have read Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, a very important work. It is a 1997 work which is set in Kerala. If for the people who have not read it, this is very important because this talks about she loves this guy who is a Dalit. So, the family does not agree to that sort of thing because, you're marrying down the caste or something like it. And then there is a gay angle or a lesbian angle that also comes in the picture. Then this book was widely criticized for its introducing the concept of incest relationship. But Arundhati Roy, being the bold writer that she is, she explored all these culturally challenging themes in this particular work. And again, a very important work when we read feminist criticism as such. Okay, so this brings us to the close of 3 ways of feminism. Before I start with the key concepts, is there any doubt with any of these things? Anything that is not clear or anything that you wish to know more, especially the people who are from first year, second year? Is there anything?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay, great. I'll move ahead then. This is the key concept of feminist criticism. Patriarchy. I don't think any of us needs explanation as to what patriarchy is. So whenever you take a text where patriarchy runs as a theme, you are talking about how patriarchy is marginalizing women or what effect does it have on a society. Gynocriticism, again a very important concept. और ये शॉ अल्टर ने दिया था. Literature of their own was the work wherein she has given this concept of gynocriticism. Understand the concept. Gyno is a word usually associated with female and then criticism. Now, this gynocriticism is talking about that we need to have a literary tradition where women occupy the center stage. The same example that, okay, maybe Wordsworth is a great poet. We are not denying his intelligence or his expertise at writing a poetry. But who said that Kamala Das is any less? Or is she a less good of a poet? Or maybe Sarojini Naidu is not that great. So the point of having a gynocriticism was that you have a literary tradition of your own where women occupy the center stage, where the themes are related to women, where the primary protagonist or the central role is of a woman. We show our life, our history, our experiences, and all of the female-centered narrative runs in a literary piece of tradition or over a period of years. So that is what gynocriticism focused on. It is Elaine Showalter's a literature of their own. In this particular work, she's talking about gynocriticism. Then there is this term called intersectionality. It is coined by this African writer called Kimberly Crenshaw. It highlights how race, class, and other identities intersect with gender. Now you need to understand that any piece of literature that is coming from global south, African nations, or maybe say any prior colonies of the British Empire or the royals, unka literature would be different than maybe what is the literature of the US or other global north or Britain or whatever. क्योंकि वहाँ पे उनके जो स्ट्रगल्स हैं वो ही डिफरेंट है और वो 10 फोल्ड है. उनका स्ट्रगल ये नहीं है कि मुझे आई हैव टू हैव लाइक फ्रीडम ऑफ दिस सॉर्ट दैट सॉर्ट और थिंग्स लाइक दैट. उनका struggle is just to move outside their home's boundary or maybe fight a particular casteist society like that. So we also have, as a prior colony, we also have like these sort of issues and challenges to deal with. So Kimberly Crenshaw, Adichie's works, Bell Hooks, ये सब African American writers हैं और mostly African writers हैं. They bring in like more I would say authenticity or originality to the challenges that women actually faced, or maybe they're closer to the ground. For example, if anybody who writes from India about the struggles of women when the partition was going on, or maybe in a post-colonial context, we would write it better because we've been party to it. We have experienced all of it. So that is what intersectionality means. That how is your race? What is your class? Are you socioeconomically powerful? Do you come from a poor background, or maybe where do you lie in that socioeconomic trajectory? That is also a very key variable in deciding as to what sort of rights you have, what sort of challenges you have. Then there is gender performativity. We discussed this with Judith Butler. She talks, I've already discussed gender performative, that you need to challenge the binary notions of gender. There is no such thing as male and a female. If you keep restricting your cultural norms and traditions, or your upbringing, or your narratives to just these two genders, that is when you're actually limiting women and causing more harm than good. And it also compromises LGBTQIA plus community, and we then fail to achieve what inclusivity actually talks about in terms of feminism. So these are like the key concepts and key works of feminist criticism. Now, whenever you are given a work for literary analysis, for example, if I give you a piece of text as to critically analyze it from a feminist lens, these are a few questions you should know. The point of me keeping the questions here is that sometimes UGC NET gives you statement wise questions, that which of the following is correct, and then they'll give you like a couple of pairs, A and B, B and C, whatever. For that you need, maybe you don't know every work. It is impossible to actually read every work or know or remember about every work. But if you know the key concept or the major plot line that, or the theory line that goes in that work, you will be able to quickly at least eliminate the options. So whenever you're eliminating the options, or whenever you're looking for it, maybe look for these questions. How are the female characters portrayed in it? I'll give you an example. You should look for you must have read Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's this Draupadi wala jo work hai, wherein this is like a reorientation of Mahabharata from a Draupadi's point of view. So you need to know, if otherwise from what we know or we have been told of Draupadi, she was like the troublemaker. But maybe from a feminist lens, we study that no, she was not a troublemaker. She was just a very empowered lady. And she was maybe somebody who just asked for what was hers. So you need to understand a text or an analysis should be based on these things. Now, if the text is reinforcing the gender roles, is it saying that, Sita is supposed to just stay in the house and Lakshman and Ram is to go out and fend for themselves? Or is a new text in Forest of Enchantments, we see that, Sita, because okay, so the Indian stories that we know of Ramayana has Sita as like a very feeble lady, and that she had a very tough time when Ravan came and she was abducted and everything. However, Sita was a warrior princess, and as a warrior princess, she knew almost all the defense, or she had that style to herself, which probably every other prince growing up must have had. So when you read Forest of Enchantments, you see Sita as a very strong lady. It does not reinforce the traditional gender norms of what we know Sita as, like a female who's very feeble and all. And sadly, the cinematic representation of Sita is also very pathetic. I mean, it actually makes her in a it positions her in a way wherein she just does not, she cannot help even herself. So that is not right. So you need to look at the text wherein it is either reinforcing the gender norms, roles, or it is challenging all of that. Then, how does the author's gender influence the text? If a male writer is writing to it or a female writer is writing, the sensitivity matters. So how is the text handled that way? Then, how do themes like sexuality, identity, power dynamics appear in the text? These are like a few questions that you should look for whenever you're analyzing a text, or whenever you're trying to even understand a text from a feminist criticism's lens. Then, The Yellow Paper, again, a very important work. They usually ask it, Gilman's ka. It talks about the confinement of women in domestic roles. Is it right? Are the storylines run, and the protagonist also keeps challenging this, that, I am not confined to domesticity, I deserve better than this, and things like that. So that is also there. Then The Handmaid's Tale, we have already discussed. So these are like from a literature's point of view, except additionally to what works we have already discussed, these are a few themes that you can want to explore whenever you are trying to take up any piece of literature. Now, these are like major writers and works from a नेट पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू स्ट्रेट अप ये तो एकदम जस्ट याद करके चले जाना विद द ईयर. मैरी वॉल्स्टनक्राफ्ट, टाइम एंड अगेन दे हैव आस्क्ड. वर्जीनिया वुल्फ, रूम ऑफ वंस ओन, टाइम एंड अगेन आस्क्ड. सिमोन दी बुवा, सेकंड सेक्स, वी हैव डिस्कस्ड. Sexual politics is there. Literature of their own. The literature of their own is the same work wherein she has given the concept of gender performativity. तो इसको उस sense में भी याद रखना. Bell Hooks is also there, and Judith Butler's Gender Trouble. No. Gender Trouble, sorry. Gender performativity is Gender Trouble. I'm so sorry. Literature of their own. She gives three things here: feminine, feminist, and female. This is the concept that she gives in literature of their own. Feminine is what society expects us. Ki, you're supposed to behave this way. As a female, you're supposed to dress this way. Maybe you should wear a sari and not maybe pantsuit or power suits, whatever. And as a feminist, so feminine is when you're being subjected to oppression, you're subjected to discrimination of all sorts. Feminist is when a female has that sort of activism in herself that, okay, this is it, this is done, I am no longer taking all of this oppression. And female is what you are and what you decide to be. So she in this particular work is talking about you should categorize women's writing in these stages, that there is one feminine writing wherein maybe we have taken up the same format or template as, I don't know, Charles Dickens has given, or any male author for that matter. Feminist is where you create your own space as a writer, as a producer of any piece of literature, that this is my style, this is my view, this is my narrative. And female is when you are in that position to own that narrative, and maybe you're starting a new wave with your narratives or with your story writing. So these are like a few works and writers. Ye to malab, it's like feminist criticism you're reading. All of this should be right on your tips with the year of publication, because they are more repeated questions hai UGC NET maybe, and for that matter MP-set also. MP-set usually asks very direct questions, that for example, who gave the concept of gender performativity? So it's straight up Judith Butler's Gender Trouble. तो वहाँ पे काफी straight up questions आ जाते हैं कभी कभी, but with UGC NET sometimes concept also works a lot. So that should help you from whatever we have discussed. Anyway, I'll be sharing all of this, so you can go back to this for reference. Okay, as I discussed, I'm just taking like this very small section of feminist criticism in Indian literature. If the Indian literature is done, I'm sure this must have been discussed. If not, they will be discussing these writers. So what the themes when we talk about Indian feminist literature, we talk about caste, class, and gender, so hai hi. Then we talk about what is the depiction of traditional roles versus modern roles. For example, maybe traditional novels or works of literature would have portrayed women as somebody who's confined to domesticity, or maybe they do just very traditional gender roles, or they associate to that or conform to that. Whereas maybe as a modern woman, you are there to maybe juggle with a job, you come home and do the work also, and maybe the gender roles are more fluid, so things like that. And then exploration of women's agency, what sort of rights I have in all senses, and what is my resistance to whatever patriarchy brings to the table. For example, Kamla Das, she's one of my favorite feminist writers. You should read her. You should also, in case you're wishing to read, so Sylvia Plath is also one of them. So Kamla Das is there. Her works echo of feminism and female rights, and rights of all for that matter who identify as a female. Mahashweta Devi is there. Arundhati Roy, God of Small Things, we've already discussed. So these are also a few writers to keep in mind. Usually with feminist criticism, they go by foreign authors, but you never know what sort of question setting is there. So keep these three writers also in the mind whenever you're discussing feminist criticism. Now, let's take the contribution and criticism. Contribution, it's not necessary to reinstate as to what transformative evolution has come with feminist criticism in the place. They have highlighted whatever the systemic oppression was there. Literary canon has been expanded. We have like a great pool of women writers emerging and like flourishing in their field. Then this also offers us tools to understand what is the power dynamic in a text, what is the position of women, where it is, where either the woman is in what position of power, of subordination, where. Then criticism is that sometimes there's like overemphasis on gender as such, and then sometimes it misses out maybe some cultural additions or cultural variables to it. Then there's also risk of essentialism, because when you say that women are supposed to do this, patriarchy ka sabse bada criticism ye hai ki it told women what to do. And now feminist criticism is also telling women what can you do, like what all can you do. So again, the tone is the same somehow, with I understand that with a lot of difference in what the intent is, but that is also there. And then accusations is there that sometimes this is too theoretical. For example, we might not agree as global south to whatever wave of feminism, whatever achievements were there in global north. So it varies, of course. So that is also, the variation also runs through and through. Okay, fine, we'll move with the PYQs, but in case there's any doubt before we move to the PYQs, I'll take it. Else I have like a couple of PYQs, like 5-7 minutes more. Any doubt that you have with work or something, anything you did not understand, want me to repeat, anything you can ask. Anything that you wish to ask, or I'll move with the PYQs.
Ma'am, I think we can go to the PYQs because...
Okay, no problem. This is the first PYQ. Which two of the following statements are applicable to feminist criticism? Is it recuperate the female writers ignored by the canon, fully endorse the social construction of gender, valorize the traditional canon uncritically, mostly rejecting the essential of male and female? Okay. B.
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. A and D.
A and D. Yeah, correct. Yes, A and D, because of course we are against the endorsement of social construction of gender, and we are not trying to valorize anything. We're just asking for simple rights. That is all what feminist criticism talks about. Right, the answer is correct. It's A and D. Okay. Who among the following feminist theories posited a separate mode of writing called écriture féminine? Julia Kristeva, Luce Irigaray, Toril Moy, Helen Chiksu. Anybody? Julia Kristeva.
Ma'am, is it the fourth option?
Yeah, so Helen Chiksu, otherwise they very rarely ask you. अगर उन्होंने पूछा भी तो they'll just ask you कि who gave this concept of écriture feminism, that feminine, that is Helen Chiksu. There are like a few concepts that you need to know, जैसे gynocriticism, Elaine Showalter, or the gender performativity given by Judith Butler, feminine, feminist, female given by Elaine Showalter. तो ये 3-4 concepts है that you should remember: écriture feminine, Helen Chiksu. Other than that, you need not know like the details of it. Écriture feminine is basically when you're trying again the same space for writing for women, like women-centered writing sort of thing. Okay, it is Helen Chiksu. The answer is fourth. Who is the author of A Literature of Their Own? Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar, Elaine Showalter, Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath.
Ma'am, Elaine Showalter.
Yeah, Elaine Showalter. It is this work only wherein she has given that concept. of feminine, feminist, and female one. Okay. Last question. Gynocriticism. Who gave gynocriticism, by the way?
I'm Elaine Showalter.
Great. Yeah. So just have this sort of thing in your mind. Then association rakhna is basically okay. Which of the following are representative text of gynocriticism? Patricia Mayer specs the female imagination. Mary Ellman's Thinking About Women. Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar's The Mad Women in the Attic. Ellen Moyer's Literary Women. And Kate Millett's Sexual Politics. Anybody?
No, ma'am, I'm not sure.
The answer is B, D, and E. That is why I was saying that we'll move back to that slide, I'll tell you. जब भी तुम लोग second wave of feminism, if you're reading, so remember the sort of writers that are there. Kate Millett, Sexual Politics. Then you have Simone de Beauvoir, Feminine Mystique. So whatever writers you have associated with each wave of feminism, if you remember, usse bhi you will be able to eliminate the options because more or less similar time par likhe gaye works hain ye sare. So if you see Mary Wollstonecraft and Virginia Woolf in the option together, so maybe if the question is somewhere related to suffrage rights, it is first wave of feminism and maybe these three writers. But since it is gynocriticism and all, you should know that Ellen Showalter ke jo bhi contemporaries hain, those are the people who would be your answer. So that is how you can eliminate the options. You need not know every work. That is impossible for you, any one of us to know. It's just that you should be smart to eliminate the options in case you're not sure about the work as such. Okay, I think that was it. In case there's any doubt or something, please let me know. I've completed well within the time. Yeah, we have time for that. Please.
Ma'am, actually, I just wanted to confirm the writers for each wave that you covered in your lecture. They are the major ones, right? So we will have to add on to their works and as well as the writers. Like maybe.
See, usually what happens is that UGC NET also keeps asking the seminal works. For example, if they're asking a question for Simone de Beauvoir, 80%, 90% of chances that it will be based on second sex. However, the pattern keeps changing and things like that. So maybe they would ask you, say, another work of Simone de Beauvoir, but more or less it is asked of second sex only. So maybe the writers that I've given उनके 2-3 works और देख लेना, but ये वाले जो works हैं वो तो बिल्कुल miss नहीं करना should be your priority.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
The thing is that, as said by Judith Butler and all, that gender is performative and we should not really focus on it as it is a social construct rather than one's own identity.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the feminist criticism, people, there was a one point when you said that these questions should be thought before. And in that question, there was that you should notice that what's the gender of the author. Isn't that very contradicting in nature?
No, see, the point of not noticing but understanding the gender of an author is only to locate the sensibilities within the text. For example, if I as a female is writing on maybe a prose or a piece of text on autonomy of body, I will have more sensibility because I might have first-hand experience. I do have first-hand experience of it, right? But as a male, maybe I would write excellently, but somewhere or not, the sensibility might be missing. Again, this is not a watertight statement. It sometimes male authors do excellent with it, and we also maybe as female authors we might lack that sort of objectivity because we'll be too emotionally connected to the issue or topic or whatever. But in gender performativity, her argument was against traditional and cultural norms rather than focusing on where the author's gender lies. Those are like two different things. We as when we are analyzing a text from a feminist criticism, we locate, of course, the gender of the authors, just to understand if the sensibilities are there or not. Nothing else. No other bias.
So I would now like to invite Pranchi Sharma to give the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My sincere thanks for your remarkable presentation on feminism, and your insights and expertise made a significant impact. And we're grateful for your valuable contribution, and thank you again for sharing your knowledge. The topic was very well received by the audience, and concluding today's lecture, I would like to thank all the members of Eklavya Club and all the students who attended the informative session. We look forward to have more of these interesting and very informative lectures. Have a great day ahead, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. All the best for whoever is writing the exam this year, and maybe if you're writing it in the next cycle also, good luck.